and this is the light episode about webcomics. What else?
Mm.
What other independent medium is worthy of the lens than this? So
It's
here you
true.
go, Web Michelle.
Hello, everybody. As you know, I am Michelle Perez. I am joined by Jake, Monster Energy.
This is a adrenaline shock. Thank you very much. It's a
Oh,
new brand that came out this year. I'm
That
very
sounds that sounds
very
like a
hip to these
urinary.
trends.
That sounds like a new urinary tract infection type.
It may end up as one. I'll let you know.
Uh, that that sounds that sounds like that sounds like a mental disorder you get after being one of those guys that used to do firing squad executions. Like
He went crazy. He got the A shock.
he got the A shock. He keeps trying to Call of Duty reload like in his house for no apparent fucking reason.
It's a bad
It's
habit.
really wild. So I'm also joined by Eliza Gager, who may or may not play first-person shooters. Many have asked.
can neither
You know.
confirm nor deny.
Okay,
It's a
so
good
we're
place
getting
to be.
we're getting a lot of non-answers. A very controversial episode. We're here talking to you today on our podcast, Working on It, about the subject of webcomics. Webcomics. You can look at them on the internet. The internet is a place where you can access many things. You could access archives, as a fellow pod member Ruben has pointed out, where you could just look at old Memorex VHS introductions. You can look up how to create bombs. Don't look up how to create bombs. Don't make a bomb. You can also see webcomics, whereupon two guys sit on a couch, not unlike your own, and they talk on the subject of whether or not Microsoft is bad at making Master Chief Halo. And you're going to hear a lot of reverent thought. Some comics will say that George W. Bush was just looking for oil overseas. Very controversial shit. Other times,
Isn't that more of like a Doonesbury thing?
I mean, Doonesbury and the 3-panel traditional comic is the format for the traditional webcomic we know. In blogosphere many moons ago, they essentially adhered very closely to that format because it's beginning, middle, end, punch, 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 punch line, and maybe number go up in the neophyte sort of mode of number go up. We didn't have social media and constant reification. You usually worked in your circles, and success was defined whether or not you could bust out of those circles and gave wider regulation or wider circulation. Like
If
the
you were
success,
pro, you could put
Yeah.
like banner ads on your shit, like manually
Right.
put banner ads. I remember that. I had like an old. I can't even remember what it was called, but it was pre Google AdSense, pre everything. But
it's like Project Wonderful, I want to say.
yes, that's what it was called.
There it is.
Yep.
It had very low prices, which, for good or ill, like would be how you'd learn about a lot of webcomics, and you'd see those sort of old style GIFs. I mean, we think about the GIFs we joke about from that ad era now, and it's like, $1 for a double cheeseburger. I'd hit that. And same basic format applies to webcomic ring comics. For me, getting out of my bubble from the webcomics I used to indulge in, which was just to get this out of the way. Penny Arcade. You may know them from guy with floofy hair, has black text, and basically makes very long-winded Lovecraft references by way of threatening his co-creator. And they're like inherently, I don't know, sexier avatars. Or sorry, we're going libidinal first and out of the gate. Like the much more attractive version of you thing is definitely a webcomic thing from that era.
Oh yeah, no, I just mean
I think of that, or I think of Mega Tokyo.
Penny Arcade was just this very like, it's like the I don't even know, like the Simpsons of webcomics or whatever. It was like if you say webcomics, that's like the first thing a lot of people, at least in the certain era, like thought of. And it's not like they were the first.
No.
They just happened to be one of the ones that really took it and broke it mainstream. And nowadays, it's like it's insane to think that they even still produce a comic. They have so much else going on.
I think they just got locked in. Which, I mean,
yeah?
in Tycho's case is kind of a shame because he actually does have, I think, some. I think he has some skills, some talent.
Oh, I think he's a good writer for sure. Yeah, I've always enjoyed reading his stuff and all. Like back when I was actually active there.
Yeah, I mean, he knows what he's doing. I will state for the record that being slightly older than both of you, I was never on anything as shameful as Penny Arcade, and all of us over on Something Awful used to make fun of you people.
Oh, I bet.
The lower tier forums down there with E-Bomb's World. That said, yeah, I mean, I always got the impression, and this is not telling tales out of school. I mean, the Penny Arcade guys posted about this, but Mike, Gabe, he had like some mental health, struggles, and he did get it medicated and kind of seemed to have kind of gotten it under control after a while. But I mean, these guys grew up together. And it was a best friend start a webcomic kind of situation. And it always seemed to me that Tycho was the slightly more neurotypical of the two of them, and probably didn't have, as far as I know, never had the same mental illness issues. And I think he kind of took care of Mike. And so I got the impression that they kind of, once the comic got established, it became, that was the breadwinner for both of them. And it's really hard to branch off from that. Plus you're typecast. I mean, where do you go from webcomics? Video games. And unless you like successfully make that jump, and you only get a couple chances to do it, you're probably not gonna go anywhere. I've always hoped that Tycho would write a fucking novel. Like that's what he wanted to do. Very obviously, he should write a novel.
I get the feeling that he will one day, but yeah, I know what you mean.
I think he will.
Take it a while.
I think that's one of the weird things I think about PA specifically, that was very text heavy, when brevity is a big thing with most, if you're working backwards from like traditional newspaper comic strip style comics.
Yeah, I was a huge newspaper comic strip kid growing up. Like I literally did read the comics page every day in the newspaper. Yeah. I loved Calvin and Hobbes, loved Far Side books. But then even on a day-to-day, I read the usually not as good syndicated strips that were going on. But some of them were really funny, like Pearls Before Swine made me laugh a lot as a kid. The Boondocks, a lot of people would forget, was a syndicated news strip before it was an animated show. And Foxtrot, which is like, to me, almost like it's very much a syndicated news panel strip, but it was doing nerdy stuff in the mainstream before webcomics, and was one of the things that actually, as a kid growing up, Bill Eamon's Foxtrot was something that I read, and I identified with the nerdy kid Jason so hard as a literal 10-year-old who was into nerdy stuff in an otherwise pretty normcore family. And growing up on that in the age I did, my point is, like, it graduated me straight into webcomics with such ease. I was like already loving that format. I just got high-speed internet. I was already reading like scanslated manga and stuff like that. So to find people that were creating their own stuff and putting it up there. And at the time, the novelty of it being just straight free was like huge in a lot of instances. Um,
Yeah.
it was free content that was funny, that spoke to you, that did not appear in a newspaper strip. And sometimes used fuck words.
Yeah, that's kind of I guess PA had like forums and boards and like subboards and stuff, and so there would be webcomic threads where you could then look at others and people's, I guess, sense of I guess where they enmeshed and kind of coalesced and agreed on things was we like a specific type of webcomic where there's a little bit of vulgarity and sometimes like a dramedy component. The ones that got very successful on their own and became almost memeable weren't necessarily PA, because the people that used memes with regard to PA were usually just dunking on them. The stuff I think about would be Overcompensating by Jeffrey Rowland. I would think of Achewood.
Sure.
I would think of Casey Green's. I don't know.
Man.
Yeah, he just
I
did
think
like
Gun Show was one that was the name of his strip for a while, and I think before that there was another name. But he's been putting stuff out under
he's been
various
super
names.
prolific,
Yeah.
and
Anime Club was a part of Gun Show, I think.
the sort of collected comics of Kate Wirtz. I think of like, what was it? Is it Chaos or something with that little cat faced guy?
Oh, I'm less familiar with that, but I was gonna say also like Kate Beaton's stuff as
Kate
like just
Beaton. There you
web
go.
comic stuff that really broke through and became more, not that it was like, I mean, she clearly went away from that very quickly.
Yeah,
Um
memory serves. Now Kate Beaton is like a children's book author, which
I think she took her bag and has a kid and doesn't, make a bunch of
honest,
new stuff anymore.
honestly
She
probably.
had some family tragedy. Her sister died
That
very
as
young.
well.
So that sort of she went home to kind of help take care of that, and that kind of
Yeah.
transitioned her into doing more mature work, which is children's books, because she's got the baby now. But yeah, there is, speaking of something awful, there was an infamous episode where Kate Beaton was convinced to join Something Awful. Someone gave her an account and told her what a big fan everybody was, which was true. But
Right.
Kate Beaton, being, sort of the ideal girl next door type, showed up and immediately everybody got very creepy. And this kind of went down in history as one of the worst things that GBS, which is the central forum on Something Awful and had pretty much all the worst posters on it.
Oh yeah,
GBS.
yeah. The
People
the phrase, yeah, go back to GBS.
Go back to GBS, GBT, GBS. Yeah, so they really fucked up, and I think she even like drew a little comic about it. I think it's the drawing that says "I am a girl on the internet, my bad," and there's like a really crude drawing of it's been around for a while. I think that was
I
in
could imagine.
response
Yeah.
to the GBS incident. It was really bad, but that was an interesting early object lesson in like, oh shit, you better be careful.
These are real people out here.
Yeah, doing fucking anything and being like visibly female.
Oh yeah, yeah. Anytime there's I mean, it's not a new phenomena, certainly, but I think it's more punctuated online, especially on message boards. If you meet any of the criteria for like I don't know, by conventional standards of a like attractive or whatever that may look like to you with your personal criteria, like you're going to get a bazillion goddamn thirsty messages. I remember coming out as trans, like back when I weighed way less. I was like built like a brick shit house, and I had people I'd known for years, basically messaging like not overtly thirsty, but there was like there's like that passive thirst, like kind of nice with it. Like, okay, dude. Fair
Complimentary
enough.
thirst.
Yeah, like I won't get on too far of a tangent, but like for me, I had like a really big exhibitionist streak for a while, and with that came that knowledge where that was going to happen. I was like, I'm just going to be really nonchalant and be like, yeah, it's cool you think that, and just one and done handshake or jerk off motion in the air, and then think about it no more. But I couldn't imagine like being someone who just works on a thing, post one single image of your face, and then just nothing but the naked libidinal hog posting, I guess, that one would get. Moving on, I think what has been cool about webcomics, when you talked about syndication earlier, I think about how you sort of break out of your bubble and into wider circulation and across sites. A lot of people on message boards circulating your stuff
Well,
basically
yeah.
is a prelude to like Facebook sharing and Twitter sharing. Like Achewood now,
And
I
certainly
like
we
the
mentioned
last
the Penny
update to
Arcade
Achewood
boards.
was in 2016.
Yeah. But like a lot of these webcomics at the time did have their own message boards as well. And like I don't know, I mean there were message boards presumably for tons of topics when I was on the Penny Arcade message board, and that wasn't the only place one could go to find a community, but it was very much like, oh, this is a good spot to go. There's a couple other like web comics I like. I'll look at their message boards. Oh, I don't like that. Oh, I'll go back to this community that I found. There's the idea that these comics sort of started fostering their own fan bases on their own territory, I guess, is pretty neat with it, and something that wasn't happening before. You couldn't go, uh, you know, somewhere to talk about your favorite TV show, let's say, with people that you knew for sure also liked that TV show. Um, Unless you were an
Or
extremely social person back in the day and you
or
were out and
the
about talking to everybody,
or the TV show that like
or it was the most popular thing in the world.
or the
At
TV
which
show
point,
does
yeah,
have message boards, but like it's moderated to death, and you have to work off of a
sure, yeah.
very bland word set and censoring of this or that.
So it's like
Versus,
we have the internet and people going to it to use it as a means of discussion, and then that just sort of melds with, oh, here's this medium that's popping up that's organic to the internet. Of course, it's going to have its own version of a chat log or a BB message board, um, be it for the fans of it or just, yeah, like I mean, none of us like Penny Arcade, even while we were still posting on the boards. Frankly, like within probably like 5 years of being in that community, we were all over the webcomic, but we were still on the boards.
we were still on the boards, and a lot of people then had like, there was official Ventrilos, and then there were Ventrilos that were like spin-offs. There were spin-off boards of the
Right.
board.
There's a lot of splinter communities. And I'm sure that Penny Arcade was not the only webcomic to have that, That's kind of my point.
Hmm.
Um,
But
and
now,
and
like,
it's funny because yeah, like they were all sort of still modeled after the type of something awful message boards that invented half of the funny stuff we all laugh at on the internet.
yeah, but what's interesting is then everything starts spiraling outwards. We go from decentralization, where okay, Facebook exists now, Twitter exists now.
Right.
Twitter would have basically people from the boards of those webcomics with the sensibilities of those webcomics, or the board where they commented on those things, and then would create their own things. This is the point of origin of a lot of big things you enjoy, but probably don't know it off the top of your head. Like, memory serves, like a good 2/3 maybe of successful dirtbag left podcasts are former something awful guys. And then, subsequently, a lot of popular memed people like Casey Green.
Right.
This is fine.
It's wild to think that he's still more or less just a webcomic artist. And I don't mean just to diminish it, but just that literally his bread and butter work is putting comics on the internet. And that dog on fire image is still just the most ridiculously influential thing that we've had to come out of the internet in a while.
And yeah, now that the internet has just basically became 4 websites,
Right.
he now has a spin-off comic on Instagram specifically called Fuck Off.
I do, yeah.
That centers around resenting having to operate just out of those websites now, as opposed to the traditional means he used to. Maybe I'm taking some artistic license with that, but I can't think of any other reason you would have your one-panel family circus style webcomics called Fuck Off, specific to Instagram, where several of them get taken down and not have it be a veiled commentary.
It's a very Casey Green thing to just silently do an insanely dark one-panel gag strip amidst all the rest of his work.
Now, for me, I think one of my favorites from the ones I had listed earlier, because I loved the one Kate Beaton comic where basically it's a bunch of strong, independent women, sort of through the I don't know how to describe it because it's a very hard sentiment to articulate.
Which one is this?
Strong female characters.
Oh,
yeah. That
so they're all wearing lingerie.
Yeah.
Tits out. Very exaggerated. And very exaggerated features. They either have like honeybee hairstyles, all wearing sunglasses.
I pulled it up. One of them has eye patches over her boobs in a boob window. It's a great design.
And it sort of precedes the sort of MCU girls get it done sort of cynical lens of female empowerment.
All the women of the MCU saving young Peter Parker.
Yes. Peter Parker who like massacres 80 aliens. That whole clusterfuck. And yeah, it's so wild. She has sex with the dude, like blows this huge cloud of cigarette smoke and then whips him out of the window like a fucking football.
I'm looking at it right now.
And yeah, just hilarious stuff. And Achewood is really one of my favorites in that it's sort of an early example of webcomics sort of having the contours of a dramedy.
I think Achewood is fascinating in a lot of different ways. A lot of ways I'm not even fully educated on.
Chris Onstad is one of those figures where, if you've heard him in interviews and the like, kind of like most opinionated creators, kind of a blowhard, kind of an asshole, very funny, very, very standoffish, which, is something that people kind of lean into more because in order to gain a following, the perception now is fan engagement, but Onstad does not really have that.
He's the closest webcomics has, I think, to like a Bill Watterson, right? Like he did monetize his stuff, so not exactly Bill Watterson, but he just doesn't engage with a lot of anyone else. He just kind of sits in his hole.
He's too old. He's Gen X, and he has at least one child and several wives, I think.
Yeah.
Like several wives.
I think he was divorced and remarried at some point during
I was about to say, word? He's a Mormon? Hell yeah. Uh,
But
yeah.
I mean, talk about a webcomic that is very, like, I think very subtly influential. Um,
Oh yeah.
there's so many ways that people talk online that it's not like Achewood necessarily influenced it
Achewood
directly. It's just
didn't.
that he was so
Ake-
able to put
mm.
those types of voices into those characters. It was specifically mostly roast beef and Ray that it's so natural to read that dialogue of that comic and think I know dudes like that all the time.
So
Um,
Achewood is sort of the opposite of Penny Arcade. There are a lot of
yeah, it's
antics.
the anti-video game dude webcomic. I think that's for sure.
There are a lot of antics. It revolves around. It originally revolved around this sort of soft-spoken but vulgar bear guy with glasses and his relatives. But then it came to really center on roast beef and Ray. Uh, roast beef is an incredible character that is a one-to-one air quotes stand in for Onstad. He
Yeah,
is
Which
and
is
these are
interesting
cartoon
because
cats.
Onstad claims that Theodore is his stand-in, which you can kind of see because Theodore is like one of the least developed of those characters and one of the least
Mhm.
personalized. But I've always thought it's one of those situations where, even the author's analysis of their own work is obviously like on its face not accurate. Um,
Sure.
but there's a lot of that stuff in Achewood. There's this obsession with masculinity and what is masculinity and what is fatherhood, and it definitely he starts to really dive into that more after he started having children. But even from the beginning, there's uh, I don't. It's not like homophobia exactly. It's more of like a fear of sort of masculine inadequacy, which is very common in Gen X media in general.
Totally.
You see it a lot.
yeah,
Which
yeah.
It's very common just among dudes growing up, I think,
Yeah,
young boy
Yeah,
culture.
specifically to Gen X, like it was the Bill Clinton years where you were we were coming out of the Reagan Bush one years, uh, constant consistent war, and then the effects of the Cold War, and
and
then
all of the gay people were dead. All of the gays had been wiped out in the AIDS epidemic. So Gen X grew up with this like huge void where,
Yeah.
there were 5 out of every 10 gay people that were supposed to be there were just missing. They had died. So the only ones left were lesbians. I grew up with lesbians. There were just lesbians everywhere. But yeah, I didn't, there didn't that the panic now about why are all these kids gay? Why are there so many more gay people than there were in 1989? Well, fucking idiot, they were dead. Now they're
Yeah.
finally like the
and
population is
It's called
like went up.
weirdly enough, and the same people enacting a lot of that moral panic, not unlike the satanic panic of back in the day, where I guess their main letter on this, like rapid onset gender dysphoria or whatever, a since debunked thing, uh, that had a point in origin on a fucking fourth wave now, just a basic parents who are anti-trans sort of board slash website.
Oh, wow.
They're all Gen Xers. They're all Gen
Of
Xers.
course, of course.
Everything is cyclical. Uh, I I don't know what we will hate in the future if we hate something, but I I would say that uh, it would sort of fold in the American contours of every other thing we've had a panic about. But the thing is, the disempowerment of roast beef, his supporting cast basically exist to sort of grab him on his shoulders and force him to live his life, force him to sort of, actually have a partner and engage with the outside world. And the whole time he's incredibly depressed. He has anxiety that is so bad where there's a classic strip where basically he's trying to go to a supermarket, sees other people in the parking lot. He has this fucking wounded look in his eyes where he's just scared to look at them. And these two guys see him run into his car and yell, fuck, 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 and then speed away. And they both look at each other like they've witnessed some sort of awful horror they have no context for.
Right.
And like, that's roast beef in a nutshell, basically.
Yeah, and that particular strip is told in the context of someone else explaining to Philippe, who is the perpetually 5-year-old baby otter character, what being depressed means. And I can't remember which character it is, but he says, it means that roast beef has trouble doing things like going to the store. And Philippe says, well, that's silly. It's easy to go to the store. You just get in your car and you drive and you get out of your car, with the innocence of a child. And then there's this cutaway to the scene that Michelle just described of it just being that you cannot go to the store. It's impossible to go to the store. And it's such a good encapsulation of what depression is like. I think that's why we all like glommed onto roast beef so strongly. I certainly
That's
did.
what I was going to say is roast beef is honestly, it's really funny to think because this happened to me at a time in my life when I was just I guess not the right age to be depressed, but I was a literal young depressed person reading a webcomic about a depressed cartoon cat. And it's one of the first times I can think about seeing something like that in media and not feeling bad about it. Like seeing that in a cartoon, laughing and identifying with it in a frankly like probably healthy way, uh, which is like one of the first steps towards like dealing with the depression. The fact that there was I pulled up this other very classic strip featuring roast beef, where Theodore is trying to tell him about all of his bad slogan T-shirts and how he won't get a date if he has any of them. And the first one just says religion is messed up, and then the like punchline shirt is just him going, "When was the last time you wore this one?" And it has "I'm the guy who sucks." And the second panel he turns around and says, "Plus I got depression." And that T-shirt literally just was so like I know so many people that immediately identified, myself included, with that, with the sentiment on that T-shirt.
Yeah, every time Eli brings home another fucking stupid shirt, I replay that scene in my head because he's gonna have to. I'm gonna have to do that to him in a few years because he's gonna get sick of all those fucking shirts, and I'll be like, "When is the last time you wore this?"
There's
and
gonna be
it'll be like
a lot of
Worf
musical parody shirts
with the unknown pleasures lines on his face, and that's like one of the better ones.
Oh my god!
Like, when have you worn this? It'll be like, I don't know. It's So every time, I mean, none of his shirts are
coming to a Goodwill near you.
Yeah,
I would probably like them better if they were depression themed, frankly.
I mean, they're Joy Division T-shirts. Doesn't that kind of count?
Check out my shirt right now.
Fraser.
Oh, I was gonna ask what text that was.
With the Thrasher text.
Yeah, I can see the Thrasher text
here. Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Good shit.
Yeah. The Thrasher text is great. Remy slapped a bunch of prints and stickers with the pervert Thrasher text, and I'm super happy about it. The other guy who sort of gets a lot of play is Ray Smuckles. Ray Smuckles is basically textbook comedic foil, but it has such a deadpan and a specific manner of speaking.
I do like the idea that
deflates a lot of the heaviness around roast beef because like there's roast beef jokes where basically he's on his job and he's just watching viral videos of people crashing and the cars exploding. Like So you
Ray is
either
quite literally the opposite of a depressed person.
yeah
Right. Ray is the aspirational masculine id.
Yeah,
His
he's
role in
incapable
the
of
gang.
taking it out.
Yeah, and he started out as being kind of a comedic trope, and then as the comic progresses and Onstad becomes more wrapped up in this idea of sort of aspirational masculinity, which is what's the name of the older character? Mr. Bear? Is it just Mr. Bear?
Is it
That's
you
not
mean
Mr.
Pat?
Bear. Yeah, it's Pat.
Pat? What?
Pat is
No,
the older teddy bear.
Yeah.
no, not Pat. Pat's the gay one, isn't he?
Yeah. So
Oh
there's
shit.
Theodore and Pat,
I mean
and
the
then there
character
is
who's older and he's always in his bathrobe.
Ah, hell. He's always got a drink.
Cornelius Bear.
Cornelius.
Cornelius Bear. Thank God.
So
Yeah,
It
Cornelius,
I'm on.
also as time goes on, the jokes about Cornelius shift from haha, he's old to wow, this guy is a real fucking badass. And at one point they had the actual contest between these characters, like who knows all the arts of manliness. And they do tests like, can you stare down a Doberman? Can you make bread from 3 ingredients? That kind of stuff. And Cornelius was the only one to pass all of those, and that sort of cemented him in this aspirational older father figure. But Ray is sort of like he's the id, he's the party animal masculine archetype. But yeah, he started out as like a fat joke, and then as the strip went on, he developed more and more respect from the writer's perspective. Actually, Space Twinks has written a lot about like the analysis of kind of monopolar gender in Achewood,
Hmm.
where there's like masculinity at one end and then just like nothingness on the other side. There's just a void because the way that the comic handles women is
Yeah, I was gonna say the only thing I could even think of that comes close is the Venture Brothers, where like these are both meaty. These are both works that are almost entirely dude centric.
right.
yeah.
That's similar,
Um,
yeah.
Like I guess both could fall under the dudes rock umbrella, but the thing about Ray specifically is uh his pathologies sort of get more fleshed out as time goes on. It goes from being implied he's a full-blown alcoholic to being like, yeah, or not implied to just it being canonized. And then I think he does a whole bunch of other drugs too, but like they have a toll on him. And also the thing is you kind of wonder if he's kind of learned to be comfortable by himself and that he doesn't need a partner like, let's say, roast beef does. But
Right.
it, it,
yeah,
it, it's kind of more of like a open question in the air, is like, being the way he is, like the reason you don't really sort of see him with uh any sort of long standing partner. And I think it's interesting, like the lack of women in Achewood, beyond
it's
beyond
really
like,
just Molly.
yeah, it's just Molly and like ancillary women
Molly,
that like,
Tina, and Penny
yeah,
are the
Oh
only
yeah,
like main named characters, and then there are some just background or secondary characters, and they're not badly written. I'm not saying that. It's just that it's very clear that they are only there as sort of Margaret Dumont characters to the rest of the cast's Marx Brothers. She's just the foil. She's the straight man basically. And so these female characters, there's a really good scene where Molly is yelling at roast beef, which she always does. Like the majority of their interactions is he is being nagged. And he says something like, I don't understand why we have to buy new dishes just because we moved in together. And she's like, because women have to compensate for a gender that would eat a fried egg off of a fart if it formed a reusable skin. And that there's this sort of awareness within the canonization of masculinity in the comic of also criticizing all of these
oh
these
absolutely.
masculine tropes that are just like, I think eventually Onset definitely ends up with the great outdoor fight is like the sort of the climax of all of this, it's just dudes in a cage in the desert beating the shit out of each other, eating rotisserie chicken with their hands and drinking, which rules. Like, I am not criticizing any of this. I love the dudes rock genre. It's created some of the greatest media
Oh
in
yeah.
Western canon. But yeah, so the women are definitely there for Onstadt to occasionally go, but this is ridiculous, and I know it's ridiculous, which I appreciate. The female characters definitely are not people. Oh
Yeah,
wait, there's a stripper who gets with Cornelius very late, and I can't remember her name, but she's the fourth
Polly.
named female character.
Yeah. They're I was gonna bring up the great outdoor fight just because you had mentioned how the strip started getting more into masculinity and particularly paternity as Onstad became a father.
Mhm.
And the central crux of the great outdoor fight, if you're not super familiar with Achewood, is simply that Ray, our heroic id type character, finds out that his dad is in fact a legendary fighter and won a competition called the Great Outdoor Fight. And so he goes with Beef in a motorcycle on a road trip to pursue his legacy and win a large outdoor fight.
Literal
And that is,
search for father, like
yeah,
not
Yeah,
even.
like it opens with Ray's father like ripping off a guy's jaw, like weirdly explicit out of nowhere, just to drive home the sort of sense of stakes at play. And it's the only Achewood I have a physical copy of.
That's right. Yeah, Dark Horse published a collection of it as its own little bit. So even if you've never read the rest of Achewood, it's pretty easy to pick up. And it more or less stands on its own. Like, you can get into the vibe of these characters almost immediately. I think that's one of the strengths of Achewood is that, like, I mean, especially me, because I read The Great Outdoor Fight when it was coming out, but I had not read even the majority of Achewood at that point. I was simply a person who found it via people sharing comics again on a message board, and loved a lot of the more like well-known Achewood strips. Started reading it as it came out, but then never. I have not sat down and read it start to finish. I've read large swaths of it at a certain time, um, but it's very interesting that that comic has sort of it almost has different periods to it.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. You can get through it quickly. I reread it probably once a year.
I I really yeah, I kind of should. Like, it would be a very a nice practice to start at the beginning and actually go through.
I always feel like I learned
Yeah,
something about storytelling when I read it. It's so well crafted. And
It really, yeah.
I don't know where Onstad got his education in writing. I mean, not that it needs to be formalized or anything, but he is so
Sure.
fucking good. And he has so many imitators that, just can't even approach the fluidity that
Yeah,
he manages with very stilted language and like argots that he should not have any familiarity with whatsoever, and just he does, and it's just effortless for him to write it. Almost like Stephen King. Like, if you try to make a movie out of a Stephen King story and you don't change the dialogue, you get something like Dreamcatcher, where
oh god, yeah, Dreamcatcher is some of the, well, it's not unnatural, but the thing is his all right, so writing for prose, right?
yeah,
There
it's
is a
that's it. It's
floatiness.
not. It's nobody did a once over on it to take it to movie. They just slapped that pure Stephen
now
King
I gotta
jab
watch
on.
Dreamcatcher.
Oh, you got to
Dream
see it, dude. It's one of the worst movies ever made, and it's unbelievable.
I
You will be shocked at who is in this movie.
I
yeah,
remember seeing the trailer for it when I was like whatever young
Yeah,
person.
one of the Wahlbergs
And
breaks the Tropic Thunder rule. I mean, it's
it's
one of my
incredible.
favorite
wild.
films.
Basically the thing about Dreamcatcher, which is, as Eliza was saying, so the thing about prose to film dialogue is why are screenplays written the way they are is because a film is sort of an unnatural state. such in the same way that prose is. But with prose, you have the benefit of the reader filling in the blanks, or in comics, what we'd call the gutters, that imaginary space where your mind forms connections, associations based on your ability to know how the process of time and actions work. And if something fucks with that sensibility, it is unnatural or comes off as a continuity error. So Dreamcatcher is insane because it is a almost one-to-one. There's this early expository dialogue where the guys are around the table saying the phrase "fuckaroony," and hearing "fuckaroony" uh, with actors saying it versus
Yeah.
reading it in prose and thinking, okay, so this is just like some dumb guys sitting around saying their in jokes and stuff.
Yeah,
But
and it's fucking Thomas Jane, and like it's just an all-star cast.
Jason Lee out of nowhere.
Jason
But
Lee.
What a
but because we haven't grown up with these guys and see what everything in the text, we've only
right.
seen this early prologue bit where these kids stand up and say, "No, no, what you're doing is wrong." Even that scene just feels weird and unnatural because
Yes.
it is mapped one-to-one from the prose.
Yep.
Whereas in it, uh, I want to say the first It remake film, which actually was very good, was someone saying, "Okay, here's the source material. Can't use the child orgy. Uh, don't want to use that. We
One
don't
thing at the top of every single It adaptation. Note.
leave that out." Uh, eh, but yeah, there's naturalistic dialogue where filmic, in the terms of film, works, and they have a candor that goes back and forth where they cuss how kids cuss, and they're not getting it wrong in the prose. It's just you have to make it more brief, and you don't have Stephen King's sort of abject narrator that avoids using adjectives, but it's still sort of sarcastic and drives home humor in a bleak way. It works better. Stephen King is probably best in short story form, which is why he would
Agreed.
probably be amazing at comics. And comics were some of his earliest influences,
I
aside
mean,
from Lovecraft
got
myth
cool ideas.
stuff.
He's chock full of cool ideas.
Yeah, but yeah, with Onstad, his sort of getting a sense of humor and imbuing his characters with the sort of thoughts that you sit around with at night when you're like interrogating how you feel about yourself. Each character in Achewood sometimes feels like either a collection of neuroses, maybe not from him, but maybe where he's had a feeling at a time. The most amazing roast beef sort of internal monologue to me is where he talks about his relationship with his partner and says that, "Well, it feels like I'm keeping her hostage, like if it like feeling as though you're just emotionally blackmailing someone into the
Sometimes love
perception of you."
is wondering if you have trapped an innocent person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's a fucking incredible way to sort of think about love, because I think of two other people who are like philosophers, like albeit pop philosophers. I think of Cornel West talking about hope being a prison, and that he will die a prisoner to hope, and then Slavoj Žižek, who talks uh, about love as a sort of prison, uh, that you're just a slave to it and its machinations, and it eroding your ability to like think about things logically or detached in order to maybe solve something, or to a greater end. And I think of that when I think of the notion of, yeah, sort of thinking of love as a hostage situation where it goes back to anytime you see her, she's nagging roast beef, and it's sort of as a result of him being incapable of like meeting either her needs or his own, and it's a fucking drag to be around him.
Right. He's
And like,
described in the comic strip in a way that I think about all the time. Like Achewood is responsible for the majority of my inner terminology, and other characters
Oh,
describe him as coming from circumstances. And that's something
yeah,
that I think
yeah.
about all the time, if because it's just such a judgment-free way of saying that somebody got fucked up in their childhood and now they're weird.
mhm.
Achewood is
Came from
so
circumstances. That love strip is an interesting example actually because he has, sometimes love is A and sometimes love is B. And the B example is wondering if you have trapped an innocent person, and it's roast beef, huddled in terror in bed next to Molly, who is asleep, just like awake at night with his mind racing. And then example A is Molly standing next to him basically in an olive oil pose, and he's going like this, and he says, to me a computer is basically a piano. And the caption on it is something like, sometimes love is dizzying highs or something like that. And so the positive example of what it's like being in a mutually satisfactory love relationship is a woman standing next to you and seeing that you are good at computer, which is like amazing. Both of these examples are highly relatable. Like I get it,
yeah,
but it's also so pathetic. And
yeah.
it's so telling to just like write it out
It's
that
also so
way.
accurate.
Sometimes I think that Onstadt knows that he's doing stuff like that, like he's aware of it, and then other times with that particular strip, he has no idea what he's doing. He's really telling on himself there, which is not bad. I mean, it makes you an honest author.
No, I think it makes it. Yeah, I think it makes it better in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. Where you mentioned how Achewood affects a lot of your internal thought process, or just internal taxonomy of things. That I can't think of another work that has so utterly changed the way I talk to other people, and not even in a necessarily intentional way,
Mhm.
but like I can if you could track the amount of times the word dog has entered my vernacular,
Right.
and when I started reading Achewood, you would see huge spikes in my teenage up to mid-20s years.
Oh,
I
yeah.
said it a lot. I said it a lot literally because of how Ray and roast beef had this sort of shorthand between one another that sure they would acknowledge other people with, but like the back and forth they had.
The way in which they could, like Eliza was saying, express, like, just huge swaths of things that we know to be true with such little with just brevity, with huge brevity. Like,
He's
"Oh,
an
he comes from
incredibly
circumstance."
efficient
He
writer.
says so much. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's nuts.
His
Um,
editorial process must be incredible because he's always doing what I strive to do in my work, which is to say the maximum amount of stuff in the smallest possible sentences. He's
yeah.
so good, and it's his vocabulary is perfect. Never see grammatical errors or idiom misusage in at any point in Achewood unless it's intentional. He's just brilliant. He has some sort of classical writing background that he's gotten
It's
from
like
somewhere, maybe not even from formal training. That's just incredible.
I'm
I
just looking at this like Ray's fake the name of Ray's fake dance tape is "The Dude Has Got No Mercy."
yes.
Like what? What if you literally had to if you had to pick a group of words that summarized a hot dance, like you can't do better than that. That's fucking a number one. It's
Yep.
like
It's
it's
incredible.
insane how much he nails it.
I have one other webcomic that has vastly influenced the entire basis of my personality, the way that I talk, and the way that I interact with other people, particularly online. Can you guess what it is?
I'll let Michelle
Oh, that's easy. XKCD.
Oh my god. I'm quitting. I quit the podcast. Goodbye.
Oh wait, there's a I think I can hear a drone approaching Michelle's location right now.
Oh Christ! All dude, fucking bring them. My entire life has been leading to a point where I just want to be atomized by a fucking Hellfire missile. Are you kidding me? I would welcome them.
especially for webcomic opinions.
All right. So XKCD was not it. I'm very ashamed.
All right. Well,
Actually,
I'll raise my hand.
I know somebody who came up on the XKCD forums. That was another big webcomic
That's
forum.
cool.
We were talking about
I can
other
imagine because that was a big webcomic in the first place. I mean, that's
Mhm.
another one that was like I had the phase where I was very young and I enjoyed that comic, and then people started sharing it a lot with me, and then I
Yeah.
sort of also grew up as an
I
individual,
They
I'm
had
not
and
limits.
then it just changed.
I'm not pedantic enough. I am an overtly aggressive person. I do not like the idea of using fact-based arguments to push a rhetorical wedge into a discussion, because I know that most arguments are purely emotion-based, and I just want to win scorched earth style. XKCD will never work for me, because I know you just have to be mean-spirited and evil to the other person and you win and you're the
Yeah.
cool guy.
XKD is definitely one of the root works that sort of led to the facts and logic movement.
The I fucking love science
Mhm.
people.
Oh
It's those
yeah.
people, yeah. I mean, and not all the
Yeah,
XKCD comics are embarrassing. There are a
Yeah,
few.
no, I have
it's
nothing against
it's
that.
like any other thing. Yeah, I can't hate too hard on it. It's just not my bag.
Right, yeah.
Um,
Oh god.
but I was gonna say to answer your actual question, is Jerk City perhaps the
Yes.
one?
There it is,
Winner.
baby.
Yeah, yeah,
York
chicken
City,
dinner, man.
which, starting in 1998, I think predates
Uh,
everything else we have spoken about.
it has to at that point. Yeah,
1998, and has come out with a comic every single day since then. Not every week, every day they have been publishing a comic since
truly
1998.
lords of the internet,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
and talk about Gen X.
Uh,
These guys,
God, yeah, this. Oh my God. So I remember, I guess, like a little preface for listeners if you're not as familiar. Jerk City is essentially a clip art comic. I don't actually know the origin of those little dudes.
well,
It's a Microsoft chat
Yeah,
program.
to
I
turn
I
it over.
I can let me take the floor here. This is
Yeah,
my
no,
my
we have
dream.
someone with a doctorate in Jerk City studies right now.
I am
Jerk
the
City was
only
something that
one.
when I came to it, I was like, "What the fuck is this?" That's all I'll
Yes.
say. I was like, I was one of the people that was immediately confused by it because I was young and kind of stupid.
Yep. I was actually on Jerk City once.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
I'll get back to that later. Um,
Yeah.
the I cannot remember when I started reading Jerk City, but I must have been 14 or 15 years old, so it was a long time ago. And I actually don't remember how I started reading it either. It must have been a cross post in an IRC channel I was in, or possibly LiveJournal, or I don't know. I definitely had a lot of older friends who would have known about Jerk City, like older, very online friends who were Gen X themselves. So I don't remember where I started reading it, but it took hold like wildfire in my crew of like dirtbag goth teen friends. And we would go to our Vampire the Masquerade LARP and we would quote Jerk City to each other and watch The Crow. And it formed the basis of our it was probably the earliest memes I ever showed to people. And eventually I got so into it that I started hot linking Jerk City. Hot linking for the younger people here, it used to be a really big concern on the internet where you hosted your images, because bandwidth was at such a premium and was so expensive,
God.
and internet hosting was so difficult that you had to figure out where to put images once you had them. So digitizing images was really difficult, but then putting them up somewhere where people could see them was really hard. You couldn't just put them up on Imgur, and even GeoCities I think didn't have a lot of hosting. So anyway, hot linking was when you took an image from another website, and instead of downloading it and then re-uploading it somewhere else, you would just build a little HTML frame around it and pull the actual image from the original server, thus stealing their bandwidth, because in the process you were taking it out of the context of the advertising, the links, the traffic and everything else. So people didn't like it. So I hot linked, hundreds of Jerk City pages to my LiveJournal. And eventually, somebody at Jerk City checked their traffic logs and found that
Mm.
they were getting a lot of traffic on individual image files from my blog because I started my internet empire on LiveJournal and got, I don't know, I had a few hundred followers or whatever. So enough people to make a blip in their traffic at the time. And Rands showed up. He's the guy who's wearing the alien outfit in Jerk City, shows up and starts leaving comments on my blog. And I was completely starstruck, obviously. And we, struck up kind of an internet friendship, which to his credit, the fact that I was literally 15, 16 at the time, he never got creepy with it. Perhaps that was his intention, or maybe he was thinking about it, but he never got weird with me or anything like that. It was purely the sort of what this fan is weird, a cute, weird
Yeah,
goth teen in Seattle. I'll talk to her to entertain myself, kind of thing.
clearly they found you because you were, bringing them traffic and stuff.
Right.
So
So he was
that's pretty
working
cool.
at Apple at the time. And as I got into, I was accepted into an art school that made me buy my first MacBook, which was a huge piece of shit. But it came with an onboard webcam, which is the first time that I had had a webcam. So the very first person that I had any sort of a face-to-face video call with on the internet was Rance from Jerk City, because we both had Apple laptops with the
Oh, that's wild.
built-in FaceTime camera or whatever it was called, of the photo booth or whatever.
Photo booth, yeah.
It was in black and white, and he posted me on his blog. There's probably still a picture of me up there. On his blog was called Rands in Repose, and it was sort of a spin-off from Jerk City, specifically talking about management in tech. I think he's written some books and stuff now. And so he like took a screenshot of me on my webcam talking to him and posted it on his blog, and was talking about how Apple technology is cool because a lot of the stuff, the hardware and stuff, you just plug it in and it works, as opposed to Windows where you are always downloading like a dozen different drivers and shit. So that's still up there on the internet somewhere. It's
You,
a picture of me in
you,
a top hat.
you've met the one not creepy guy in tech. Incredible. That
Yeah.
owns.
I
Uh,
actually have a history of that. Like I've had a lot of interactions with various dudes who, and Rands has not, to be clear. I have never heard anything bad about him. But yeah, this was an interaction that never ended up being creepy, even though it certainly could have been. It never turned out that way. Um, so this, I think he was so tickled by the idea of this, like, this teenager who was like a goth model was so into Jerk City that he decided to actually put me in the comic. And he got one of my modeling photos. He didn't steal it, I sent it to him. And in it, again, I'm wearing a top hat, and it's just a picture of me. And then I think Spigot is in front of it, and I cannot remember what Spigot is saying, but Spigot is and has always been my favorite character. And then there's another Jerk City comic around that same time where Rand says, "I like top hats," and that's it. I think it's just the one panel. So it became
So simple.
a small meme in Jerk City, and I'm not the only one. There's actually an ongoing reference in Jerk City to somebody called Canadian Goth Girl. So I think this was like a thing that they did. For some reason, goth teenagers love Jerk City, and gay teenagers love Jerk City. And again, Space Twinks, I got to give Space Twinks credit for this because he has talked a lot about it. But there is something about just the dick sucking and the constant reference to homosexual porn and calling everybody a faggot. There's just something about it that doesn't read as homophobia. It reads as like gay in jokes, which it definitely is not. I mean, it is just straight up. I'm pretty sure it's just straight up homophobia, but there's something about it.
It strikes to me as the very casual dude homophobia that
Yeah,
I grew up myself with, of dudes just call each other faggot all the time when
right,
you're a kid,
exactly.
and it's not good. It's not a good. You have to unlearn that shit.
well, well,
Um,
well. Here's the thing.
but
Thinking of
yeah,
Achewood, it's kind of a similar thread where they have that familiarity with one another that they can push on those certain fault lines
well,
and
certainly.
buttons. And I
And to
think,
get a little into the origins of Jerk City, am I accurate in saying it's mostly based on chat logs? between people talking to one another?
Oh, I was gonna say that, yeah. It's the way that it works technically is that they're all on IRC.
Great.
And there was a program with Microsoft Office Suite that came bundled with Microsoft Office Suite called Microsoft Comic Chat. And Microsoft Comic Chat was a graphical user interface for IRC. So it was an IRC client just like Merc or any of the others.
Oh,
So you fill in your server information and your passwords and what channels you want to join and all the regular IRC client thing, except it parses all of the output through the format of a comic. And all of the illustrations are done by famous Fantagraphics Underground artist Jim Woodring.
okay.
But
This makes a lot of sense now.
the end user license agreement that went with Microsoft Comic Chat stipulated that anything that you make with the Microsoft Office Suite by necessity was your sole copyright. And because Comic Chat was included with the bundle, that included Comic Chat. So they got through a copyright loophole, and that's why they can use all of this Jim Woodring art for for their bizarre
That's
comic.
Yeah.
absolutely wild. I
The,
didn't
the
even
other
realize that was. I knew that it was a chat going to a comic. I had no clue that was actually tied into the origin of its creation. And that it wasn't just someone's like idea to do that. That there was like a Microsoft program that said, "Hey, we're going to do that." Makes so much sense now. Like given the context of the art,
Yes.
these little clip dudes.
So I think
Uh,
they were doing it like in the actual program for a really long time, but eventually
sure,
they stopped trying to do it in the program and they built because they're all coders, they're all
I'm
Silicon
sure they
Valley
can get a
tech
lot of shit done.
guys, right? So
Yeah,
they built basically a little, you know, input output where they would feed selected chunks from their chat logs into the comic creator and then spit out whatever came out the other side. So that gave them a little bit more control. They did publish a book. There was a very very brief book called the Big Book of Jerk City,
that rules.
and I got one of the copies. Naturally, it is signed by some of them, and I took
Nice.
it to Seattle. I took it to Emerald City Comic Con because Jim Woodring was one of the guests.
Great, fantastic idea. I want to say.
And I waited in line, and I go up to this guy who's probably like, I don't know, 55 years old. And he is a normal Fantagraphics guy, right? A lot of the Fantagraphics artists are very normie, like comics with an X dudes from
Yep.
the last generation. And I put this book in front of him, and he gets this expression on his face like he had maybe seen it before, but certainly not in this form. And I said, Mr. Woodring, would you be willing to sign this for me? And he looks a little discomfited, but he does sign it, and he writes in the front, "This is so damn peculiar, Jim Woodring."
That rules.
I still have this. It's probably the most autographed copy of the Big Book of Jerk City in existence.
That's a freaking
So
artifact.
yeah.
it really is. I'm quite proud of it. So, and then later I started Jerk City HD, which
Hell
was
yes.
a project on Tumblr where I said, okay, all of us gay and trans goths, millennials on Tumblr love Jerk City, right? And they're all like, yeah. So I said, okay, here's what we're gonna do: redraw in high definition, interpreting that however you want, your favorite episode of Jerk City. And there are just a few rules, and they are A, B, and C. And submit it to me, and I'll, collect it in a Tumblr. And we did. We got, I don't know, probably definitely a few
It's one of
dozen.
I definitely remember seeing some of those for sure.
Yeah.
I back when I used Tumblr pre-porn 9/11, one of my favorite ones that I reblogged several times was the HD version of Up Late. What about nuts? What about balls?
That is
What about
definitely the most famous
What
one.
about fat queer dicks?
And it's this beautiful, beautiful watercolor.
Beautiful.
illustration. And we got several of those that were just gorgeous. That one I think is my favorite and probably is the jewel of the collection. I did a few, they were okay. So I'd really like to put this together into a zine, but I talked to my publisher about it and he was like, fuck no, I'm not touching this. So because I have sort of a personal connection to Jerk City, I think that I could probably get one or two of them.
Oh God, yes.
I know that Harrison Page, and I don't know which Jerk City he is, or if he's just like he might be one of the peripheral guys like Net or something, but he's definitely involved and he always follows me on whatever the new social media platform is. And Rands is definitely around, although I haven't spoken to him recently. So I think that I could probably reach out and get some good interviews and shit. They are pretty withdrawn. They don't really do interviews. They don't they don't talk about their stuff. This has never been a primary focus for any of them. It's all
I love that. I love that it has always existed as a sort of like passion / side project. I think that's how it stays so consistent. I wanted to take a bit just to read for listeners, just to read literally today's Jerk City.
Which is now called Bone Quest, by the way. They changed their name.
Right. So yeah, go to bonequest.com in order to see this. There is in fact a restaurant that has jerkcity.com now.
Yes. They gave
I'm sure that might have been a battle. That's good for, that's honestly pretty chill of them. I can think that's the right thing to do. But this is starring Pants and Spigot. Pants is a multi-eyed alien, and I think you said was Rands, represents Rands. And Spigot is essentially every beatnik cartoon you've ever seen in your life. If this is bringing to mind images for listeners, then you've probably seen a Jerk City strip before, and you've said, "What the hell is this?" And then you've like scrolled past it. Okay, this is called Up Then Off. Panel 1 is simply Rand's or Pants saying, "Beat me up, then beat me off." And then panel 2 is Spigot replying, "Stouffer singles and Stroganoff." And then panel 3 is, "Those two lines form to make the Spider-Man theme," which is fucking incredible. Because we could all sing that to ourselves in our head now.
Yeah,
and that's just like
sending you a link to my guest appearance in Jerk City.
Oh yeah.
Nobody use my lipstick while I'm gone. Yeah, that is what I asked to be put in the strip. I don't know if it's still up on the site because their search is not great.
Positively.
So I stole Nobody Use My Lipstick While I'm Gone from the funniest motherfucker in the IRC channel that I hung out in, whose name was Lipid. And Lipid, probably by himself, filled the quotes file that we had. And Lipid still follows me on Instagram and Facebook. And this motherfucker found out that my dad wrote a science fiction novel, bought the book, read it, and now he will tease me about it.
Wow.
I have seriously known this dude for 20 years, literally 20 years at this point. I've never met him. I don't know anything about him. He's still funny as fuck, and he just will pop up on Instagram sometimes and like quote the tagline from my dad's novel to me and then make a joke about, something that happened in the book. It's unbelievable. I have never been trolled so well in my life.
I was gonna say that's commitment. It's
wonderful.
Dedication.
I'm just delighted every time he pops up. I mean, God bless the people who stick with you online for decades, and for what reason? Like, you have no connection to them except that they like you and you like them. That's great. There's no drama. There's no bullshit. You know nothing about their lives. So that's my big dream, to have a Jerk City HD book. I want to be the person to document this weird cultural phenomenon. I think I'm the best person to do it.
I can
honestly,
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
over almost 8,000 of these. Almost 8,000 Jerk Cities. It's 7,946. So that's pretty soon.
The guy Spigot, whose real name, which is not his actual real name, his nom de plume is Tristan A. Farnan, which he stole from All Creatures Great and Small, the James Herriot books. You can kind of see how the writers who are really good constantly put references into older literature in their work, and that's something we're losing in these newer generations of fucking, especially video game writers. But
Mhm.
Tristan A. Farnan also did Leisure Town, which is much less known webcomic than Jerk City, but should be better known,
Yeah,
not only
that
because
feels like a name I haven't heard in years.
it's really funny, it's incredibly influential. If you go and actually read Leisure Town, and a lot of it is still up, you can see hints of language, turns of phrase, and jokes, and like even terminology and stuff that made it down into modern internet. Like it's foundational to what we think of as like internet dialogue now. It's also very fucking old. And all of the characters are these little plastic bendy animals, and it's all photographic Photoshop composites. So he would photograph all these bendy animals in front of a green screen, and then composite them into pictures that he took himself wandering around the Bay Area. So it all takes place in San Francisco, and I can't. There's an interview with him where he describes like just the hundreds of hours it takes to assemble these tiny, tiny little photographic comics. Um, and I think I also read something about him just like not saving them in high res because he only intended to put them on the web. And so he's never done a book and never can because everything is this big. It's just like postage stamp sized, um, which sucks because they're really incredibly good. But QA Confidential, if anybody wants to check out Leisure Town, just go right to QA Confidential first. It's the
Yeah, I'm actually on the site right now, and you're right. It's everything is in like a 800 by 640 res, like square. You have to kind of squint to see really close at some of it. But I do remember again, Leisure Town and Jerk City were both these comics that when I went into these like kind of sharing threads or went to other people for recommendations on webcomics, if these were put in front of me, they were I was immediately confronted with something that I knew that I like respected that other people liked it, but that I was like, what is this? It was so dense and almost unknowable to me. Like
Mhm.
I remember being so confused by Jerk City
Yeah.
as a essentially as like a 15-year-old, let's say. And it was because I was coming from all this like pretty much structured joke stuff and like dudes, talking about their dicks in video games. Whereas Jerk City is very much like, I mean, now I can't help but find it as anything but hilarious. But I'm trying to like put myself back in the mindset of seeing it and being like, why is this funny? I feel like this is dumb. And
Yes.
then like it's so funny to think that nowadays it's like I have the exact opposite. I'm like, this is dumb. This is hilarious. How is this? How is this not funny?
And I mean,
But Leisure Town was like the opposite, where I felt almost like very dense and very much like when I read it when I looked at it as a teen, I was like, this is over my head. This is
yeah.
like I was
There,
intimidated by it, but I
I think
respected the heck out of it.
I think there's a certain amount of there's an amount of how vulgar it is. Uh, you cannot map some sort of ideological bent to it. Uh, because what about fat queer dicks in the abstract is just
That's what I'm
a
saying. Yeah,
funny
like it's
fucking phrase. That's the thing. Whereas you add any sort of bent outside of these incredible images, and you're gonna like maybe think, okay, what's wrong with this fucking person?
Right.
And to that end, I think like there's a certain type of poster online, like I think Twitter especially, where it's like this very sort of ironic detachment, but there it isn't mapped to this sort of uncaring like Jerk City kind of comes off like proto machine learning.
Yes.
It comes off like
totally.
a horse ebooks type of thing where
Which it's
it's a
sort of
bunch of stuff run through a machine.
right, because
So
it's
Right,
these
right.
4 guys in a room talking to each other all day, presumably while they're at their tech jobs, like the way that we're just typing to each other constantly. But there's something magical about, that particular combination of organic inputs that outputs this incredibly funny shit constantly.
and it's a
Um,
non sequitur also. So like
right,
Right.
that's all
and
there is
it's
to it.
curated. So
Sometimes you just want to jerk off to chubby men, and that's all there is to it. I don't owe you an explanation. And then there it is. It's done.
One of the ones I think about all the time, I'm looking at it right here because I actually do save my favorite ones sometimes. You know,
Oh, that's
if I
great.
run through them again, and even I have never seen every single Jerk City webcomic. I don't even know if it's possible. So it's 3 panels. I mean, we were talking about the 3 panel is sort of the ideal webcomic form. And it's just Spigot, who is the beatnik character standing on a beautiful watercolor background of what looks like Utah, this beautiful purple mountain in the background. And it's silent panel, silent panel. And the third panel, he looks like he's screaming and he says, "Folks, I have been waiting for Godot for a good 10-15 minutes." And this one line has single-handedly ruined many concepts for me. Waiting for Godot will never not have this attached to it for me.
Yeah.
Waiting for Godot is funny to me now because I think of this comic. The concept of waiting in general is funny to me. I can't not think about folks. I've been waiting for Godot for a 10-15 minutes. Spigot probably has the most of these like one-liners, but there are so many of them that are just really applicable. There's another one, it's Jerk City 242, and I think it's just 1 panel. And again, Spigot is just standing in a room. He says, "I'm a short, wide goth who's making a cyber difference." I think about this every single day. Like spiritually, I am that short, wide goth that's making a cyber difference. You know, like I get on, I log on, I do my little tweets. I'm making a cyber difference. It's that sort of universal relatability that is
Yeah,
evident in all of the best works. It's there in the good penny arcades. It's there in the good Ake. Well, all of Achewood is good.
true.
You're just like, yes, that's me.
Yeah. I think the other thing about Jerk City is there's so much of it that the ones people pick out are indicative of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, no, yeah,
And
This is
absolutely.
they
better than a
gravitate toward
horoscope. Yeah, that'd be a good
exactly.
threat. Instead of telling me your horoscope, post your favorite jerks. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna post that.
That'd be perfect.
For to sort of wrap up, I want to think about one person in particular for me, because I don't even know about any drama or this or that, and this is a no drama scenario. But I think of the quasi controversial Kate Wirtz. Kate Wirtz, big influence on me. I don't think I ever would have made the pervert without having first read Ass Castle. Are you familiar with Ass Castle? Ass
Absolutely.
Oh,
Castle.
we talked about her on the episode with Colin Space Twinks.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, not
I've done work with Kate Wirtz. I was in the Gay for
Hell,
Satan.
Hell Gay Satan.
Hail Gay Satan. Yeah, yeah. I did.
You were the person who introduced K-Words to me, Michelle, as far as I remember. I remember you linking me to some of those comics way back in the day.
Yeah, there's a very obscure comic, Smokes. Uh,
Yep.
Mhm.
Smokes is probably one of the bleakest things I'd ever read. Uh, and I don't know if the artist like doesn't want to talk about it, so I won't go on at length. But I would say, oh wait, no, I think Kate Wirtz is probably like not traumatized or this or that, and I don't know what is in her heart or whatever. But like, it's basically one where it's incredibly bleak. It's around a revolving group of teens who basically get put through a wheat thresher. It's about like subjects about like survival, sex work, just to have a home to live in. It's about just losing your job, your boss losing her job. It's about beating the homeless to death. It is pitch black. But Ass Castle is probably one of the uh, earliest examples I can think of about sort of discomfort with self in a completely unintellectual way that comes all the way back around full circle to being one of the most thoughtful meditations on coming out as being either trans or gay or this or that. And the entirety of the comic can basically be summed up by the first lines of the first page. Hey, wait, I just jacked off to gay porn. Does that make me gay? Skip a beat. It probably does make me gay. Fuck. Maybe I'll kill myself. That's asshole. That's
Sheesh. Yeah, no,
asshole. It's
that's a hell of a first page, right?
it goes around this character and uh ghosts and sucking the dicks of ghosts and three-headed crow things, and uh eventually progresses to a point with realistic photography that is taken amazingly, and it just escalates and escalates while the character starts wearing feminine clothes and is opposite this really dumb, abusive person, and uh, shows some of the earliest versions of Kate Wirtz's rendition of Death, which is probably one of my favorite renditions of Death. You probably, if you are a Wirtz head, you'll probably remember Death as like puffing out this big thing of weed smoke, and it's spelling out something I forget. Basically, a bunch of Kate Wirtz's old work is gone forever after her computer was fried. And yeah,
Oh, okay.
there's
It should be I wanted to just point out, like,
Mhm.
her style is a very, we've been describing this very sort of, like, bleak, dark, serious, take of a comic. Her style is very much, intentionally cartoony. It's
Mhm.
it's 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 cute animals having a bad time. In it, and I think it wouldn't be inaccurate to say it's a little bit centered in the furry community.
Mhm.
The anthropomorphic animals are all up in your comics, but it is, I think, notable if you haven't seen any of these before. Just the juxtaposition of her art with the subject matter really is it's
Really
something that you don't see too often, or
bold,
maybe
bright, bold, bright
yeah,
colors.
pastel colors, very very simple line work. And like the handwritten lettering even is like very just it
Yeah,
just has a sort of a it looks like she's drawing it on cardboard paper almost as an intentional stylistic choice.
Mhm.
Um,
it looks like equal parts like almost like MS Paint style meets uh, pff, uh I don't know how to describe it. It's a very difficult thing to describe. It's not.
it's very simple and expressive. I think it's awesome. Like it's
She's
very
doing a lot of painting from life, particularly recently. Her work has she's started to merge like this hyper cartoony, very flat, but still textured anthropomorphic work on top of sort of impressionist digital life painting, and it's so uncanny because she's intentionally hitting like the uncanny valley between the cartooniness and the hyper reality, and a lot of her stuff is like horror based, if not like in material, then certainly in its approach. And it has that sort of the same uneasy feeling of the sort of the unheimlich experience of a familiar situation that Silent Hill gives you. And I think a lot of her work is based in that the JRPG horror setting, because you do get that same kind of feeling of like Fatal Frame, Silent Hill, of familiar places turning out to be um, threatening, or even if they don't change at all, to have always been threatening. And I particularly identify her work with the horror of the suburbs and the horror of sort of the monoculture of middle America, because she really does a lot of like parking lots and um, interchangeable suburban bedrooms and beige walls and that kind of stuff. And I really admire that. And it's deeply unwholesome. It's very
her
eerie.
her work. Whenever I've asked and others have asked and spoken to her, uh, like she's also not as like she's not consumed as much as all of us, because when I think of horror of the suburbs, I immediately think Lynch, I think Blue Velvet,
Hmm.
and that opening scene where there are a bunch of these grubs basically just underneath the surface of this grass, and they just get louder and louder, and it's trying to get across to the viewer that we have this polite, lovely setting, and this father just has a heart attack and is completely beside himself and is just disempowered, and like she hasn't like consumed a lot of the stuff that people attribute it to her. Like I think of that, I think of Harmony Korine and like Gummo and shit, and her main the thing she talks about consuming the most is like slasher movies.
Yeah,
and
That rules.
it's such a crazy specific view of the world that she sort of created her own thing. Like there's through lines with all of her comics where it's almost sort of a shared mythos unto itself. There's like an entity, Yint's Inch or whatever, that persists through all of them. That is this sort of awful cosmic darkness that hangs over all of these people. Maybe with the exception of Smokes. Smokes is probably the only self-contained one of hers I can think of outside of these sort of memeable comics. Anything with the narrative form seems to adhere to like the Wurtzian universe she has. And like for me, I don't want to recreate that. I want to do my own thing. But when I worked with anyone, I think of that sort of deadpan sensibility Wirtz had, the things I liked about and what I don't want to recreate in order to have my own identity as a creator. And like in terms of that, I think I could sum a lot of her work up as like, what if the kids from slasher movies were like fleshed out human beings, and you just also applied that logic to the people enacting the horrors, and you also see notes of pop culture she has consumed. One of the dead gay characters she has is this little goth bear guy named Varg, who is obviously a fucking Varg Vikernes reference.
Pretty funny.
Now, if any of you see Varg now, he's just a weird meme unto himself that is, a guy who killed a guy who also believes he is Gandalf. And
he's getting YouTube money.
If you are an attractive woman, he will call you an orc. And that is the world we live in. And I think it's wild to see just this deeply unexplainable phenomena in her work, like the sexual bits, the characters' self-hatred, and the crazy situations all of these kids are in, and them being at the mercy of the world, and the machinations of others within this world, and who you root for is just up and down, and it's very dense. And I think what I like about her work is that it's incredibly difficult nowadays, especially. I think Eliza was talking about this on Twitter. We're in an era of explainers, because everyone has think piece brain, and like, here's the end of not Tenet, but fucking what's that other Christopher Nolan movie? Christ, the ones where the buildings fuck each other and they go up and down, and it's Call of Duty.
Transformers.
Yes.
Inception. So like, Inception is the first mainstream thing I saw where the sort of explainer culture that would grow to be 2,000 YouTubes where you have to have everything explained. Like, try jumping into any Kate Wirtz comic and immediately have all of your bearings, and it's just pure unadulterated mystery, and questions you'll probably never have answered, and answers the author never intends to give you. And I think if there's anything I gravitate towards more, is that singular impulse to like, maybe you don't need to know, maybe what you imagine and to a point, because you do have to, have a satisfying narrative, but like the impulse to have everything answered definitively is sort of a betrayal of trying to reflect a genuine viewpoint, a genuine message in work. And
yeah, you have to, if you are going to be any kind of a critical thinker, you have to be comfortable with ambiguity. You need that dualism, or you're just never going to fucking understand anything. It's teaching people to be dumber. These explainers are. It's really bad.
It bums me out. Explaining culture bums me out because I've had people. I guess this is less. I've basically been compared to people that make YouTube videos by people that know me, except I don't make YouTube videos, and I feel like there's something that's sort of the point I'm trying to make, which is that like oftentimes I guess the passion with which I'll explain something or even try to sell a work to someone else comes off as that kind of fervor. But YouTube explaining is like, um,
it's a
like
psychosis. It's a psychosis.
we talked about just sort of the general vibe of a YouTuber on our other episode, but the explainer category specifically has its root in this sort of dumb like bad nerd logic that has
Mhm.
taken over everything, which is that like, oh, I'm the guy that knows the most about comic books, and trust me, in my personal life, I have been the guy that knows the most about comic books. It's not that's not great. That's not a good place to be.
It's
um
almost a sort of a mode of argumentation.
right, exactly.
Everyone didn't understand that Lynch ending. No, you did. And so the explainers are never titled "My Take on the ending of this." It is
Which is
explained. The ending explained. So
yeah.
so then you can put your flag post in the ground saying, "Got it. Here
I
it
just
is."
want to go Google like "No Country for Old Men Explained" right now and see what people have to say.
And the other
Or
thing
just
about
or
it
any
is,
ambiguous work.
I would mind it less if their conclusions weren't so fucking bad. Like,
Also that.
none
True.
of these people have ever read a book from the literature genre, like they don't know what that
Yeah.
is. They have
Yeah.
no idea what the fucking tropes of Joseph Campbell are. They don't know what the monomyth is. They don't like any of the even like 101 level of English literacy is not there for them. And that's the problem with being the guy who knows the most about comic books. Those comic books are, at this point, they're in their like fourth generation of nerds, so less so now, but certainly were based during the 1940s in classical literature. These people who were making these comic books were not dorks who had never consumed anything except other comic books. They were people who come from books. They came from cinema. They came from museums and literature and, classical work. Those were the references that they were making. And that knowledge has been completely suppressed. It's just gone. So I was actually mad about a YouTube drama reporter called The Right Opinion for a while because his
Oh,
his
no.
his videos are all like
Sorry,
3 hours
not a great
long.
sentence. Go
He's
on.
a British guy. His videos are 3 hours long, and he just does like really stupid, low grade drama reporting. Like James Charles and shit like that, which I put on while I'm working because I cannot have anything on that's good or I won't work.
Right.
So I end up consuming many hours of this stuff, and I was mad at him at first because his videos were so long and he was not saying anything interesting or particularly incisive. And then I realized something after a while. I realized that he was explaining how the world works to his audience, who are most of them, probably 15 years old. So he would have to do this really long, this 45-minute explanation of here's what happens when children are turned into pop stars. And he would have to like tell this long story in order to get to the coverage of the drama that he was trying to do, because otherwise the 15-year-olds are not going to know this is bad. Here's why. here are examples that we've all heard of before, except for you guys, because, why would you? You're very young. And then I started to appreciate what he was doing. It wasn't for me, but he was trying to fill in a little bit of that sort of background information that people don't have anymore. When I used to watch The Simpsons with my family, they would explain the references to me. And then they'd be like, oh, this is, The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. They've turned it into a funny cartoon, but here's the history of it. This would go on during the commercial breaks, which we would put on mute so that we could have a conversation, which I learned later is not common thing that families do anyway. But my mom's an English major, so she'd be like, here's what this means. And she knows everything about movies. So then she'd be like, let's go to the local movie store and rent the movie that this is a send up of so that you know what the joke is. Because if you don't know what they're riffing on, it's not funny. So even if your only goal in life is to laugh at The Simpsons, it is in your best interests to educate yourself about this stuff. To this day, that's a good reason to watch something. Like, if you want to laugh at the memes, you got to watch the thing.
It's true.
The thing now is, I think, why the explainer stuff exists. Because by itself, obviously, it can be a neutral entity. But the other thing is, now, sort of the didactic method like that is, it's also just, again, about who plants the flagpole. And it speaks to a sort of a massive loss of sort of larger critical structures that could fill in those gaps for you or fill it in with your reading. A thing I think of constantly is Roger Ebert's review of Starship Troopers and him not fucking getting it at all. But there is an inherent value to Roger Ebert. Roger Ebert saying that and not getting a good reading of it can then be used to someone who has critical faculties now, where Paul Verhoeven made something that flew over people's fucking heads, and there was a measure of gatekeeping because he is a critic who sort of shows quality to people, and it's like, this is demonstrative of quality. Here's where your money should go, and like norms would maybe trend in a certain way, maybe they wouldn't, but only with Roger Ebert can something become cult. Now, the exact opposite has happened with MCU-based stuff, where comic books sort of, the Avengers were nowhere near as popular as the Justice League as individual characters. Maybe Spider-Man was the most well-known guy, but now it is all you will ever see, and they are all the most popular, blah, 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 blah. They take up the most space, and instead of individual critics and sort of argumentation being taken into account, now it's aggregate scores. So a person who wants to be didactic has two choices now. They can actually do critical work, and like, even if they're a fucking idiot, can plant their flagpole and have an interpretation, a definitive interpretation, or they could be aware of all of these norms and instead maybe like use it as a sort of culture war wedge, which is basically, if there's the annoying side of the explainer, then it's the, I know what all of this is, and this is you trying to push this thing or that thing. And it is a whole other entity unto itself, where it isn't even about it being a critical lens. It is about a sort of culture war wedge. And this has existed for years among all criticisms. I think the most punctuated example most of us can think of is the film critic Armand White, who is a sort of meme unto himself, where he's a deeply right-wing guy, but his whole deal is like, actually, Citizen Kane sucks dick, and Transformers, this is high cinema, all of these
contrarian.
Yeah, but the thing is, I don't even know if he's a contrarian because of how he is committed to his specific project. It almost sort of loops back around to the great thing that you will wake up thinking of in the middle of the night is no, he believes that shit. He loves that shit, and he sees that value in dog shit. And like, I think what I dislike immensely about the sort of explainer culture is that it is a sort of passive version of that, of having all of your answers met, and that this is the definitive view of the world, which is, obviously a very narrow view of the world. And for me, for comics specifically as a form, and the webcomic, the idea of mystery, of not having all of the information visually conveyed to you, but still not having any idea of what to do with it, aside from maybe looking at your life, having some experiences, coming back to it some years later, and having a completely different reading of it. If you read Ass Castle beginning to end in your late teens or early 20s like I did, it's a bunch of funny gay jokes you probably would think were indistinguishable from Jerk City. There's a floor dick and you have to suck it. You look at it now and it is a trans narrative. Complete with Kate Wirtz's dead name and everything. Like, or maybe another reading of it could be that it is someone coming to grips with that, or that it is simply maybe someone with their view of that situation. But like, obviously with Kate Wirtz, it seems to largely be, air quotes, answered, but like the idea of mystery and also not having all of your questions answered, not knowing everything rattling around in the author's brain, in an age where if you want to make it now, you have to engage with people on some level or another, be it through a proxy or whatever. Like for me, this podcast, I don't know if I would create a pseudonym or something in which to engage with people on it, but I feel like this is probably a way for me personally to get out my ideas to people, even though I probably speak way better and more, I guess, understandable in text. Like, or, and I've also heard from people, whenever I read your comics, I literally hear your voice and it fucks with my head. And
I mean, I have that, but I've been talking to you for more than a decade, so I feel like that's different.
Podcasts are nice because there's a certain amount of sunk cost fallacy by the audience. They have to really invest some shit. You have to sit through a podcast. You got to sit there for 2 hours if you want to have any reaction to the stuff that's said on the podcast. And by that point, it's like, what are you going to do? Take audio clips and then say, no, it's not, and post it on Twitter? No, you're not going to do that. It's much harder to get in somebody's mentions and get mad about a podcast than it is to get about a tweet. Like the barrier for entering discourse about a podcast is much higher, which is why I think there is slightly less like casual bloodletting around podcasts. Like if there is podcast drama, it's usually because something actually went down. Which is nice.
And it's internecine conflict between people.
Exactly.
Who shit you're not going to ever see, or if you do see them, then something has went deeply wrong.
Yeah. I would like to say that we forgot a very important webcomic, and that is Pictures for Sad Children.
Oh fuck.
Oh,
yeah.
So true. No, that's a great. I was going to also just bring up Perry Bible Fellowship. I mean, there's a lot of good ones. That's at least now you can get most of it in a hardbound book, which is nice.
Oh shit! Pictures for Sad Children. I'm not gonna try to be an asshole here, but I had a problem being able to differentiate this one between Cyanide and Happiness. I'm very sorry.
Oh,
Uh, but I think the color usage was like, I was
yeah.
like, maybe that's the prequel to it. I had known that for the longest time, and it took forever to be like, no, they're two separate comics. And granted, I was in my early 20s, but
I
yeah,
mean, yeah, we could easily do a webcomics part 2 because
holy
that's
shit.
again, that's another comic that is just so very, I never read that regularly, and I know so many of those strips, like, just from
Yeah.
having been circulated.
Yeah, there I mean, that is another example of a creator kind of not being driven mad exactly, but certainly getting fed up with their audience and having a Kickstarter nightmare and just being like, fuck you, I'm out. And taking down a lot of their work and hiding a lot of it too. I have like a PDF that I was given through a third party of new-ish pictures for sad children stuff, and was told very explicitly, do not send this around, don't circulate it. So it's gotten to that point where, some of his work is now apocryphal, because of how badly it all turned out, which is something that happens a lot with webcomics. Like there's something about them that tends towards decline and destruction. um, which
It's
sucks.
engagement. It's engagement
Yeah.
because you're on the web. The venues to reach Bill Watterson aren't the same as the venues to reach Onstad or the creator of the
Right.
Pictures for Sad Children. And so, uh, yeah, people take that shit and they run with it. And internet entitlement uh, is very, very weird. I think of God, the guys from the band Have a Nice Life. Uh, the the album Death Consciousness became really popular on the 4chan Moo board, their music board, but it is like the suicidal online guys, like one of the top albums of all time. Incredibly lo-fi production, and it is, basically written by a guy whose father had died, and he was trying to reconcile the concepts of death across many songs in a sort of arg like narrative throughout it. But uh they had to like basically make boundaries because people were coming up to them at shows basically saying like, you saved your life, and like that's a crazy thing to be told by a stranger, and that's like good and positive and affirming. But like there were also people saying like, I don't know how I'm going to make it through another day, etc. And you're not they had to like draw a line saying like, I am not a medical professional. I think there are things you can do, but I can't be that for you.
Hmm.
And like I actually need to live my life, and you're not a bad person for wanting what you want, but like I made something. I am not your parental surrogate or whatever. Like boundaries and the erosion of boundaries
Yeah.
i- is what I feel is specific to the sort of web artist now.
Yeah, that's the parasocial thing.
Yeah.
Um, it's fucked. I get a little bit of that with problem glyphs just because of the nature of the project, and I've had to like work really hard from the beginning to sort of keep that at bay. And the enforced anonymity is part of that. It's like I will never know who you are, um, and I don't want to. Like I don't want to hear from you again after I draw your thing or whatever. But I have heard from people the same kind of thing. Got me through a hard time, got a tattoo and it helped, or whatever it is. And I appreciate it, obviously, but luckily it hasn't gotten super weird yet. And I kind of attribute that to the posting techniques that we were talking about in an earlier episode of the sort of the boundaries that you have to keep reifying.
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing. To sort of put a nice little bow on it, I think. My own personal experience. I've been all over the country. I've actually met a lot of people that had positive things to say about the book, or have talked about affirming things. I've actually was friends with someone in the state I had moved to, who like talked at length about it after we got to know each other better, and I was like, that's cool. But it's a weird, unique thing where I became friends with this person because she has an idea from the work, and then she knows me, the person, and like they're I can't see what's in her head, but obviously there's a disparity or this imagined idea of self, and then the reality is, like anyone else. But I think with webcomics, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is that I feel like we'd have less of this if we didn't have a sort of aggregate focused critical faculty. Now we're going to be the lesser for like millionaire fucking hedge fund guys being in charge of all of the structures of critical engagement with something. We're all going. I'm so tired of outlets that report on work solely speaking in anodyne, cynical use of, I have to say, social justice language, to sort of turn it into another commodity instead of something you use to critically engage with something, to sort of take the words people use to like quantify their experience and just sort of turn it into a packaging. And you're seeing so many outlets basically act in the same capacity that game magazines used to in the day. It's awful, and we'll be the lesser for it, because a lot of those people could kind of keep you away from this sort of dead end mindset of like this complete ownership of the artist and their work in your mind and then your perceptions.
It's hard to imagine some of the webcomics that were so popular back in the day making it through that type of aggregate analysis these days, or making it into the mainstream like they were even a decade ago, even just in 2010. I think there could be a whole nother discussion about what webcomics are like these days, because we didn't really go into that as much. But it feels like there's just I don't know if there's something right now that is like what Achewood was in 2006, and there probably is. It might just be completely unknown to me at this point.
Well, there are, but those
yeah.
people now do two things. They are super cognizant of social media. They immediately jump to print, or they immediately jump to young adult work, which
Right.
is where all the money is.
Exactly. There's less space for just the internet creator to be putting their stuff out.
Like I think of Cucumber Quest. I think Bingo Love was a big webcomic that then I think got published at Dark Horse. If I'm wrong about this, shoot me in the chest with a gun. Air quotes, don't actually shoot me in the chest with a gun. Maybe in Minecraft, possibly in Halo, not in Kane and Lynch 1 or Kane and Lynch 2 Dog Days. I want to get all the money from the robberies, but no one really plays those games, and that's a whole other can of worms. But yes, and yeah, a lot of those people now kind of made the move that even Remy and I did that. Remy did a lot of Tumblr print work, and then and we went to print after being in an online publication. Right. A lot of people are aware of the access culture and kind of try to do traditional comic stuff moving to now, and that we could do a whole other series of discussions about that, because that's having been through that maelstrom, it's fucking insane. There are good parts of it. There were incredibly bad parts of it, but I think the good outweighed the bad. And I think it's a incredibly interesting time, but it's one where you really have to, unfortunately, exert a lot of control, otherwise it'll get away from you. But we will show you all the secrets from the wizard's robe. and his hat and his cauldron. And there are fat queer dicks above you, below you, beside you, near you.
Keep it down.
I'm just saying.
She's only here to speak the truth. Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah. God. All right. For working on it, I am Michelle Perez, as always, and with Eliza Gager. Jake, Ruben will be returning in Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Thank you. I was going to do that if you weren't, so I have to make a James Bond joke if it's queued up.
Oh my God. We said we wouldn't do 2 hours.